wanting to tell the story in a sort of more dramatic, like what works in a dramatic arc, as opposed to like pure documentarianism of this happened and that happened and this happened. So on previous projects I tried to be sort of, I did sort of traditional documentary, and then this one it was more about, okay, we'll film all these events and then we'll try and make a movie. So chronological order kind of didn't really matter. It was more about, okay, here's the character arcs and what they do over a period of time, and let's just put the character arcs together. So, I mean, the events of each character are in chronological order, but just not all of the characters' stories.
That's kind of a big question.
You can take your time to answer it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, why did we make this movie? I guess we made this movie because when the umbrella movement happened, it was obviously going to be very difficult to film everything that was happening, because it was huge. It went on. We didn't know how long it was going to last, and it was in multiple places. And I figured that other people would do that, and I wasn't so interested in filming protest footage. So what became interesting as the protest sort of started, you know, when we passed the first period of the umbrella movement, was that see people started losing heart, and that idea that, you know, this huge thing had happened and everyone had put all this effort into it, and then it didn't seem to be going anywhere, and they didn't seem to be making progress in terms of negotiation with the government to get any of their demands. And that sort of sense of, I don't know, depression. Most of the people I knew in Hong Kong felt pretty depressed post-umbrella movement. And so this movie was more about, well, okay, how do you get over such a situation and find the strength to carry on? And obviously, you know, when I was editing this film and we were making this film, I don't know, it seemed quite difficult, and it seemed the idea that, you know, something like what's happening in Hong Kong right now would happen seemed distant. Most people seem pretty depressed and despondent. So to see what's happening now, well, you know, it needed to happen, basically. It should have happened 10 years ago, in my opinion.
Right after the ending of this movie, the 2016 elections, not long after that, Nathan Law got disqualified for the improper swearing at oath thing. I was wondering why you didn't include that as part of the theme to continually fighting and perhaps losing and fighting. Were you on the deadline of that? And second of all, who wrote that crappy academic Kantian paper?
Yeah, I mean, basically the reason for not including those events is just simply that you got to stop filming at some point. Otherwise, you just keep filming all the time. You never have a movie. I mean, there was a version of this movie that was like over 10 hours. So you kind of have to, at some point, say, okay, enough is enough. We've kind of got a character arc. Maybe what happened to Nathan afterwards, that's another movie. I'm not saying that, you know, I would make that, maybe someone else would make that. But, you know, you could start a new movie with, oh, Nathan wins the 2016 election, and then, oh, all this other bad stuff happens afterwards, and then how is he now? You know, so really it was a case of, after the umbrella movement, they had like no hopes, they felt despondent, and then actually they still, obviously society still supported them. And even I was completely wrong on in that September election, because I remember Joshua was saying to me, oh, you know, I don't think we can win, and I was like, yeah, I don't think you're going to win at all. I think you don't stand a chance. And I was very wrong, but pleased to be. Yeah, I don't know who wrote the academic paper, not Derek.
He wrote his own speech.
Yeah, Derek is always looking for some way of cutting corners. That's why he gets himself into messes.
Thank you very much for the meaningful and thought-provoking documentary. I see that you take all the characters up to the end instead of a rather positive or particularly negative ending. It's more like they're all in the juncture of deciding whether it's all positive, negative, go on. They have the burden to bear. And This is a totally creative question. I want to ask, if you were to do this documentary now, with the recent events, with a lot of things got changed, would you still think this is, at the moment, we're still in the same position of indecision of whether it's a positive thing or negative thing? Or how would you actually change? Just totally, maybe you can make the next documentary. Just totally want to see how your creative mind is going over that direction.
I don't really like to put a positive or a negative on it. These are the things that happened, and these are how these people felt about it. There's kind of no right or wrong. I don't necessarily agree with any of them, but they're all entitled to their viewpoints. There's another film in the pipeline, not that I'm going to direct, but some of the guys from 10 Years are directing a film which I most likely will end up producing for them. We're in negotiations at the moment. So there will be, my time making Hong Kong movies has not ended, basically.
What's the budget of the movie, and were those actors and actresses volunteers? And how did you raise their money?
They're not actors and actresses, they're real life people who I persuaded to let me film them. The budget of the movie, well actually my accountant knows, but even I don't, because I kind of just got to the point where we were making it, and when you run out of money, you say, okay, what do we do? Just forget about all this? We just spent all this money already, or do we beg, borrow, and steal and try to find some more money to make it happen? Luckily, I had a pretty successful Netflix movie which paid me quite well, so I ended up putting a lot of money into this film, which is much to the chagrin of my wife.
Other than the political events happening and for the sake of documenting this, what else personally inspired you to continue documenting these events?
I think you just get a closeness to the subject. I mean, I already was close to the subject before I began documenting Hong Kong's democracy movement in films. So, there have been years of doing research. There was all these people that I knew. It felt like their story was important. It still feels like their story is important. What's happening now almost feels a bit like vindication, because more than 10 years ago, when I sort of first embarked on properly studying Hong Kong, many times I would be told, why are you studying Hong Kong? Like, what's the point? Study China. And I would sort of try to say to them all the time, well actually, studying Hong Kong is very important to understanding China, because Hong Kong still has some level of freedom, so it draws out the liaison office. They can't work completely in the shadows, and therefore you can see how the Communist Party operates in a way that on the mainland is not possible. There was a level of interest that goes back more than 15 years in Hong Kong. Or not just interest, but actual study goes back more than 15 years. So it felt like you just continue. And even now, I'm working at the moment. I'm producing a documentary series on the Russian mafia, but Hong Kong is still like a passion. So when the 10 Years guys came and said, "We'd like you to be involved in trying to help us make this doc," I was like, it wasn't really. I didn't give it a second thought. It's like, yeah, of course I'll help you. Of course I want to be involved. Of course I want to do that. Of course I want to try to find a way to bring what's happening in Hong Kong right now to a wide audience as possible.
Any more questions? Oh, here, you at the back.
Okay, so I noticed in the video, and even the audience here, everyone is quite young. Did you purposely make the video for the intended target audience of younger people? And number two, did you want to portray kind of the issue or the struggle going on in Hong Kong with the younger generation versus the older generation?
think, why did I get interested in, my interest in Hong Kong dates back a long way, but my sort of interest in in documenting it on film was an abandoned PhD. And the PhD began and I was, went to meet and interview people like Martin Lee, and, Martin I like very much, but, he's a man, well, at the time approaching his 80s and now in his 80s, and he's done an awful lot, but right now he's not the most dynamic figure in Hong Kong, in Hong Kong's democracy movement. And I happened to meet Joshua Wong before he was famous. It was like his first protest he organized. And I realized, wow, that's far more exciting. And that maybe making a movie about him would be more interesting and would reach a much wider audience than a PhD thesis ever would. So that was kind of the genesis of how I began to follow the subject matter in sort of film perspective. But yeah, the young, I have plenty of friends who are far older than me in Hong Kong, and I also know lots of the older generation are doing lots of things behind the scenes to support. So I don't think it's necessarily young and old. I think there is a different dynamic, but it's not a them and us, young and old. There's a kind of split down the middle. But certainly, maybe the younger generation is more pro-democracy, but not exclusively. Likewise, the older generation is maybe less so, but not exclusively also. It doesn't run. It's not quite so simple as old versus young.
If not, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Is that can you talk about your future projects? Do you have any future projects or any projects that you're working on, and can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, so on Wednesday I was in New York because we had a new film premiere at Doc NYC. It was about a Vietnamese pop star called Mai Khoi, who she was kind of named the Lady Gaga of Vietnam, and she sort of was a darling of the Communist Party. They helped her become famous, and then she decided she wants to sort of go a bit like Madonna or Lady Gaga and have slightly more sexualized lyrics. And the Vietnamese Communist Party clamped down on it and said no. She gets very angry and decides that she's going to become a free speech campaigner, and the way she's going to do that is by running for parliament in Vietnam, which is technically possible, but obviously in reality not possible. And so, hijinks ensue, and she ends up meeting President Obama. So that film is done. Hopefully we'll sell it to someone and it will get worldwide distribution. And then I'm right in the middle now shooting a new documentary series which explores the fall of the Soviet Union and how illegal capital flight or money laundering combined with the mafia to corrupt Western politics. So that will be, I don't know, it's going to take the next year of my life. It's already taken 1 year, so it'll take another year. So yeah, that's keeping me busy basically. And then there's this Hong Kong project, so lots of stuff.
I also have a question. So why did you pick the 5 films specifically? And when you were planning the movie, did you have any other candidates that did not get involved in the movie in the end?
Yeah, there were a couple of other people that we filmed for a little while, and then I decided that they weren't doing anything interesting enough to keep filming. That happens. I mean, the guys on this new film that's happening right now, these 10 years guys, they've got like 10 characters they're filming. And I said to them, look, guys, one bit of advice I can give you is don't make a movie with more than 5 people, because I struggle doing this one. So, they're looking at who to cut out and reduce the characters. But why did I choose these 5? Okay, basically it boils down to my wife urging me to make something more commercial, which is what, when I started this project, I thought this would be. So my wife had this idea, she said, well, if you had like Joshua, well, everybody knows who he is, and you have access, and Denise Ho, she's famous, so, you'll be able to sell the movie. So it kind of came through a commercial decision at the beginning. And then in the end, the film took a lot longer to make than we originally thought, and all the kind of commercial considerations went out the door because the people who were originally going to distribute the film in Hong Kong suddenly started doing business in China and decided not to distribute the film. So it became a little bit more difficult. So yeah, I mean, I think it was just also they were like, some of these people were relatively well known. So it meant that, if you make a movie about people no one knows, it doesn't mean it can't happen, but obviously it's a lot easier if people do already have some knowledge. Like when you go to the movie, you want to see a movie with Brad Pitt, not some guy that you've never heard of. It's the same thing with documentaries.
When you're making this movie, is there anything happen that is unforgettable for you?
Yeah, I mean, the boxing match was pretty unforgettable. It was like surreal. Could kind of believe what was happening in front of my eyes. Nathan winning was pretty unbelievable because I was absolutely convinced he didn't stand a chance, so I was completely wrong. Derek cheating on his exam paper, that wasn't unbelievable, that was very believable. Yeah.
And when you were interviewing the people, like when they were having conversation in Cantonese, how were you able to capture or decide which conversation to capture, or was there a translator with you, or how did that
no, I mean, I spent enough time in Hong Kong to know enough Cantonese to know what the general gist of the conversation is, if not all of it. Plus, the cameraman, Jonathan, who's filming this Russia project with me in America at the moment, he's local Hong Konger, so he's pretty smart and understands the subject matter. So between us, there was no problem. And then I edited this myself. When you watch the rushes often enough, you understand what they're saying.
You mentioned earlier that you decided to choose Hong Kong as a theme because of a previous relationship. So how did the making of this documentary change your relationship with Hong Kong, or how did it just change your perspective on it?
I don't know if it changed my perspective or my relationship. My relationship with Hong Kong is, I don't know, I spent the last 15 years either living there or commuting there. And the vast majority of my closest friends are Hong Kong people. And when you spend a lot of time, I don't really have any friends in England. I have friends here, I have friends in Hong Kong and other places in Europe. And it's normally just because you go filming and you make friends. And I go back to the UK and I see old friends and they sort of say to me, "Oh, what did you do?" And I was like, "Well, we went to Ukraine and I met some Russian mobster, or I did this, or I was in Hong Kong, or we were in a protest." I said, "What do you do?" "Oh, I sat in the office and typed emails." We kind of don't have anything in common anymore. So my relationship with Hong Kong is this is like a second home. That's that. I feel it's home. Somewhat like that.
When you're filming this film, do you encounter any obstacles, interference from the Hong Kong government or the Chinese government? The second question is, do you have a problem to show your film in Hong Kong?
In the making of it, I noticed we started getting more interference making this film than our previous films. The police have kind of a bit more of an attitude. And getting permits to do anything was a problem, whereas in the past it seemed just very easy. So they seemed to be putting up small obstacles, nothing serious, but just little headaches. Obviously now I don't think that's obviously the case. It's obviously changed quite considerably. But in terms of distributing it, yeah. I mean, we had a film 5 years ago, Lesson in Descent, that came out, and the Hong Kong Film Festival showed it, and they did all the PR, and I had to pull strings because I had friends, but we were able to get it into cinemas, and we were able to get a distribution company. This time round, the distribution company disappears after having said yes, they'd do it. The cinemas all just turned around and said there's no way we can show this after the 10 years thing. So, 10 years was this amazing film which had this sort of unbelievable success of winning the Hong Kong Film Awards and stuff, but they couldn't show it in the cinema, and it also made the situation really toxic for anyone else following them in terms of essentially it's impossible to make a documentary in Hong Kong now and make any money from it if you are not making it and then selling it to Netflix or someone on the world stage, because there's no outlet to show your films. No cinema will show it because their attitude is quite simple. They could, for the 2 hours or whatever it is your running time, they could put on a Marvel movie, which Hollywood has put a huge P&A budget behind, and they know that they will fill the cinema. And there will be no political risk from doing so. Or they could put on your small documentary where there's very small P&A budget and there's a huge political risk. And when they have massive rents that they have to pay, it comes down to pure finance. So, I don't really blame the cinemas. I mean, I think they're just cowardly, but there's a lot of people like that. But yeah, it's sad and it makes it incredibly hard. I'm lucky enough to have, other jobs, like other documentary jobs which pay okay. But I know, for instance, the young girl who made the Leung Ting Kei movie, Nora. I mean, she's making great movies in Hong Kong, but she doesn't have many opportunities to show them in Hong Kong. And luckily, I think she's won some awards in Asian film festivals, which is great. But it's tough, and it's tough to earn a living. And Hong Kong is incredibly expensive.
A lot of students and protesters in Hong Kong right now, they are actually fighting for freedom, as we all know. So do you have any words for them?
Well, keep it up. Don't give up now. I don't know. My personal view is that it's a shame that this didn't happen 10 years ago, because what was the previous lot doing? What was my generation doing? It's kind of amazing to think that, I mean, I was there when Article 23 happened on July 1st, 2003, and this huge protest happens, and then nothing much really happens until Joshua Wong turns up in 2012. And I think there was a lost decade there when lots of things the government was doing were grinding away and taking away freedoms slowly but surely. People didn't really stand up and do anything about it. And I think that's probably my generation's fault, to be honest. And now, we've got kids who are not even 18, fighting pitched battles.
Youngest arrested was 11.
Yeah, so there you go. God, I don't know if I haven't got kids, but God, I don't know if I want my 11-year-old out there doing that. But someone's got to do it. You don't stand for something, you fall for anything.
I see. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for coming, and I'd like to remind you that outside at our table, actually this documentary, Last Access to Kai Tak, is actually, you can get the Blu-ray DVD outside for $20, and we also have fundraising going on where 70% of the profit will go into helping frontliners getting their medical support, and the remaining will be going to Ryerson University and York University students to do more activism and raise more awareness on campus. So thank you everyone for coming. Stay warm and have a great evening.